selecting all of the keyframes in the graph editor on that cylinder, I'm going to go V and choose vector as the keyframe handle type. This will allow it to spin with no sort of curve between it, as it's going to spin at a consistent speed the whole time now. And as you can see, that works just perfectly with our ball swinging through it. Okay, so now it's time for a few quick materials and some rendering. So I'm just going to go ahead and give our floor a little bit of thickness, split our window, and open up a shader editor over on the left here. And to close off the Properties tab and create a new material. Here I'm going to jump up to the Blender Preferences and enable the Node Wrangler, as this helps with materials a ton for doing simple basic materials. It speeds up your workflow a ton. So enable the Node Wrangler. And here I'm going to use a few PBR materials from cc0textures.com. It's a great website with all kinds of free textures that you can download. I think most of these are all made in Substance Painter, but go ahead and download some of these PBR materials. I use some of the metal and paint materials for my surfaces here, so go ahead and download them. I'll link it in the description. So with the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, all we have to do now is grab our PBR shader and go Control-Shift-T, and this will allow us to open up all the PBR materials at one time. So going to wherever you saved out those textures, grabbing all of the PBR textures in that folder, and you can see here if I switch to the thumbnail view, we can see what they look like. We have them all there, and click Open. You can see that with the Node Wrangler add-on, we automatically open up the roughness and normal maps. We're going to go ahead and delete the displacement, as we don't need that. But here you can see it did all of the hard work for us. We have our normal map, our roughness map, and our color map all opened up. I'm just switching over to cycles here now and choosing GPU compute, as I can render a whole lot faster using a GPU, and it will render even faster if you enable optics and you have an RTX GPU, because Blender is now RTX accelerated and will render almost twice as fast in most cases when you're enabling optics. So switching to rendered view here, we can see that wood PBR material that I opened up there on our floor, and it's looking pretty cool, but it needs a little bit of lighting. So we're going to jump over to our environment settings and open up an HDR from HDR Haven. Again, I'll link to it in the description where you guys can grab that. But opening up that HDR, you can see we have a much nicer looking result right now, and that PBR material is also looking really cool. So now let's quick set up our camera for a nice rendered animation. So I'm just going to grab our camera up there in the outliner and then go Alt-Control-0 to snap it to my view. As I found an angle from about 45 degrees on the scene, it looks nice. I'm going to increase the strength of that HDR up to about a 1.5 over in the environment settings, and then under film enable transparent, so we have a transparent background on our scene. Cool. So now I'm just going to add in a few more PBR materials by grabbing our sphere, going new material over in our shader editor, and then going Control-Shift-T with Node Wrangler to open up an entire PBR material all at one time by grabbing our painted material here and selecting them all. And here you can see it's working really nice. You do just want to double check to make sure that it got the right material in every case, because as you can see here, for the metallic color, it actually opened up the wrong texture as the naming scheme kind of messed it up. So in this case, you just have to open up the right texture for that output, but it definitely speeds up your workflow quite a bit using this shortcut and the Node Wrangler add-on. So just repeating the same step on the red sphere there, giving it a red painted material as well. I'm just repositioning my camera and making my aspect ratio a little bit more square, as I found it worked well for this animation. Then you might want to jump over to your render settings and enable motion blur, as that looks really nice rendered in cycles with an animation like this. And then we'll also go to our camera settings, and over on the right here we can enable depth of field and then change the f-stop down to something like a 0.5 for a nice shallow depth of field effect. If we enable limits in the viewport display, you can see that plus is going to be our focused object. So I'm just adjusting the distance here then to make sure that plus is right on our spinning cylinder, and that will work nicely. Then you can go to the color management settings over in your render settings, and we'll just change the look to be a medium high contrast, as it gives a little bit more contrastiness to our scene. Then before we do a final render, we're going to jump over to our render layers here and enable the denoising data. So running a quick render here, you can see we have our nice ball swinging animation. I'm just going to switch to the compositing tab, click use nodes, and you can see we have those extra passes there for the denoising data. We're going to go ahead and go Shift A, add in a filter denoise, and then just connect the denoising albedo to albedo, the denoising normal to the normal, and then the noisy image to the image. Control Shift click that denoise node to add a viewer node, and you can see we have a clean image. Here is before, here is after, and it's definitely a lot cleaner. Now I'm going to show you a quick tip to add in a nice sort of gradient background behind our satisfying simulation animation here. And by doing that, I'm just going to go Shift A and add in a box mask. Here I'm going to go ahead and make the size to be a 0.45 on both the X and Y axis. Then I'm going to go Shift A and add in a blur change it to Gaussian blur, connecting it up right there. We'll change it to Y and then give it an X and Y blur of about a 15 to 16 amount. Blurring it like this gives ourselves a nice sort of vignette gradient look. Then I'm just going to add in a color mix node. We'll change it to soft light. We'll move the blur node to be connected into the factor of that soft light. And then for that top socket, I'm just going to pick a nice sort of blue-gray material. And this just gives us a nice sort of soft gradient light with a little bit of a brighter inside and a darker outside, which I thought looked kind of nice. Then I'm just going to add in a color alpha over node, connecting our denoised image to the bottom and our nice gradient to the top. Control Shift clicking that. And there you have it. You can see we have our finished rendered image ready to be rendered as an animation now. If you wanted to add even more intensity to that light, you can just duplicate that soft light and repeat it one more time. So you get a nice overlay, making it even brighter in the center. And then for a little bit of a vignette effect, you can duplicate your box mask and your blur node, increase the blur maybe a little bit more this time, and then duplicate that mixed node one more time, switch it to multiply this time. And then if you connect the blur to the bottom socket, you can see we add in a vignette. We'll go ahead and turn the factor down, and that just gives a nice little subtle vignette over the whole scene too. Connect your last output to the composite node and the viewer node, and you'll be ready to start rendering an animation out. Switching over to the render settings here, just to show you the file that I usually use for animations, I use FFmpeg video and then change the encoding container over to MPEG-4. This is what I found to be a good file format just for test renders. And if you hit rendered animation right now, after choosing an output, you'll be ready with your rendered animation. Here is the final result that you can see we have. But that's going to wrap up this video, guys. I hope you had some fun and found it ultra satisfying. If you did, you can leave a like on the video, or if you had a question, you can leave it in the comment section below. I'd again like to thank Dashlane for sponsoring this video. You can check them out with the link in the description. But that's going to do it for me, guys, and keep on creating. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye!